Hey guys, what's going on? It's Hey Coach Ryan, episode 10. I'm Coach Ryan Knapp, and we're going to jump right into March's question today, which is a really good one. She says, can people actually run a full 100 miler, or how should you incorporate walking into your race plan? What if you still feel good, or what if you still feel good when it's your planned walking break time? Do you keep running, or do you stop and walk? Is there a way to pick a sustainable pace and have even splits for a full 100 miles? I'm guessing the pros run 15 hours must, but how does that translate into mortals like us? And that's a really good question. We're going to look at it from two ways, okay? The first, so why do people stop running in an ultramarathon? The first is they have some sort of physical limitation or, biomechanical limitation. What does that mean? Their hip gets tight, their hip gets sore, their knee hurts, their back hurts, their shoulders hurt, they can't run it, their ankle's swollen, whatever. So those types of limitations are going to stop people from running and are going to cause, if you want to look at just an even split across the way, that's going to cause them to happen. The more steps that you take running, these things usually happen toward the end of the race because you get tired and these limitations come up. So making sure that you have full range of motion, that you've dealt with any injuries, and that will give you need that body to be able to give you the opportunity to run that full 100 miles. If you're driving a car and you get a flat tire, it doesn't matter. You're not going to be able to have sustained gas mileage through the whole time because you're just going to have to stop because you have a flat tire or you have a broken alternator or whatever it is. So anything that breaks is just going to stop you from being able to do that. So we want to solve those issues. Now, assuming we have everything in the good working order, why do we stop physiologically, or why does our body make us stop, or what causes that to happen? Well, what we're going to look at is two terms that are directly related to each other: coupling and decoupling. Now, when we're training and we're looking at aerobic fitness, how do I tell that someone's aerobically fit? When you upload a run and you have heart rate and you're wearing your Garmin or your GPS and you have heart rate and you have pace, what I can look at are those two lines together. So if you're running at a sustained heart rate and you're running at a sustained pace and those two lines stay parallel, they're said that they're coupled together. So one is a function of the other. So you're running at that pace that gives you that heart rate, or you're running at that heart rate that gives you that pace. This tells me that we're in a good, we're aerobically fit for this effort and this time that we did. Now, down here are two examples of what's called decoupling. And what decoupling means is that your heart rate or your pace break off from one another and they don't stay the same. So we have these parallel lines, right? And what happens is toward the end of the race or toward the end of an effort, if someone is not aerobically fit, what will happen is their pace or their heart rate will begin to increase and their pace will begin to drop. Or their heart rate will stay the same and their pace will begin to drop at the end. Or the third one that I didn't draw, which I'll just draw the lines, is essentially their heart rate will rise and their pace will remain the same. So again, these both are playing off of one another, but these are the three ways that you see it happen. So heart rate rises, pace stays the same. Heart rate rises, pace drops, or pace stays the same, heart rate rises. So they're not running in that parallel line. Now, what we want to do, what we see for an ultramarathon and what you can see for most races is this decoupling happening. And when that decoupling happens, that's when you're not going to run basically, and you're not going to run an even split, and you're going to have trouble and have to walk and take longer toward the end of the race because you see this happen. So we want to stop that decoupling from happening. Now, that happens based on a few different factors. It happens based on your aerobic fitness, but it also matters what sort of pace and what sort of heart rate you're going out at. If you were going out at a much lower heart rate, even than your zone 2 conversational pace, the likelihood of you being able to maintain that for the entire time is much higher because the impact on your body is much less. Now, your pace will obviously have an effect on that as well. If you're going out at a lower heart rate, your pace will be slower, but you'll be able to maintain that for a longer amount of time. Now, when you look at decoupling in a race, if someone just runs their normal zone 2 pace and can't handle it and they're not aerobically fit, everything's good with their body, you'll see that happen. Usually in an ultra, you'll see the heart rate start to rise and creep up, and you'll see the pace drop because they're just so fatigued. You usually don't see pace stay the same or heart rate stay the same. You see these two things happen and they end up walking, or if they're running, you see that big change. So how do we achieve this blue line, or how do we just achieve an even split throughout time? Now, a way to do that is by taking walking breaks. Now, why do you take walking breaks? You take walking breaks to lower your heart rate, to allow you to be able to recover, and to also give your body time to rest. And then you can assume that you can maintain a 20-minute run and a 5-minute walk for the entire time without having to decouple. You will probably see some decoupling in the end where your heart rate will be higher on the running portions, but what you want to do is be able to run for a longer period of time. You want to be able to run for a longer period of time instead of having that drop off where you're not able to run, where you have that big heart rate spike and then you have to walk for the rest of the race. Now, to your question of if you're doing a walking break, or if you're taking walking breaks and you feel good, should you stop? Yes. What I encourage people to do is, if they're going to do a walk run break, to start it from the beginning and to follow that for the entire time. Now, you may have to change it as you get closer toward the end of the race, as you start to fatigue. But what matters to me is the heart rate here and the pace here. And if this is a 100-miler, we'll just say right there is mile 80. This is when it matters. It matters to me down here. This here, people are going to be coupled. You're going to be coupled at mile 10 or at mile 20 or at mile 30 or at mile 40 or at mile 50 or at mile 60. All right. At mile 10 and mile 20, you should be coupled, because if you're running your right pace, that's where you should be. Most people will be there. Even if they were running faster, their marathon pace, they're still going to be coupled. But when it starts getting into mile 50 and mile 60 and mile 70, this is when you're going to see these things start to happen, and you're going to have the least chance of running that even split. But if you give yourself those walking breaks and you have those planned in, then you're going to be able to maintain that for the entire time. You're going to maintain that interval for 100 miles. And that's when you're going to see those even splits. There's a chance that you'll slow down at the end, but you will either see the even split or become much closer to an even split than if you had this sort of very noticeable decoupling. What you can also do is essentially pick a pace that is much, much slower. So let's assume your heart rate's down here and your pace is really, really slow. But you might be able to maintain that very, very low heart rate. So for those in miles to go, like a zone 1 heart rate for the entire 100 miles. Now, what can happen is the pace might be too slow. And like we talked about in the beginning, biomechanically, you might start making some changes and you might not be able to maintain that. So you want to see if you're going to keep your heart rate low, 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 and just keep that for the entire race, then you're going to want to make sure that you're used to running at that sort of effort. Now, I would say in a lot of the I'm going through my mind and going through races that I've seen. I would say, I can't even venture a guess if it's maybe 50-50, but both have an impact. So this sort of decoupling where you're running really, really well and you just start to get a really high heart rate and it's tough and you start to run slower happens. But also what happens is the first thing where that you start to fatigue and you start to fatigue in your body and you start to have issues like your knee is swollen and hips and blah, 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 blah. And those things stop you from running. So we want to combat both of those, meaning you need to go into the races and have as many issues as you can figured out, hopefully all of them. And then we need to go into the race and pick an effort or pick a plan that's going to be sustainable for that entire race. And again, we're looking at a race where you can run the full 100 miles roughly. That's not a race that has tons and tons of elevation where that's going to dictate basically if we're walking or if we're running. So other coaches might have different ideas on this, but this is what I've seen succeed, and definitely the science that's behind it, where you're seeing that decoupling from heart rate and pace, and that's what's really causing you to slow down. So we want to avoid that at all costs. All right, so if you're going to run 100 and you want to pick a walk break, pick that walk break, stay by that walk break from mile 1 all the way to the end. You may have to change it a little bit as you get closer toward the end of the race, but you want to just maintain that nice, even pace throughout, and that's what's going to get you possibly a negative split, an even split, or hopefully the least amount of positive split that you possibly can. All right, that was a super good question. It was an awesome one to kind of draw out, and I hope that helps. If you have any questions about this specifically, go ahead and leave a question in the comments, or make sure to get a hold of me and I can answer it in a following episode. If not, make sure to ask more questions with the hashtag, well, I can talk today, heycoachryan, and I look forward to answering more questions later. So it's getting close to Thanksgiving here in the US, so happy Thanksgiving to everyone out there, and I will see you soon with episode 11. Thanks as always for tuning in, and have a great day.